The bit I'm doing is, hello and welcome to Force for Thought, the only podcast dedicated to the evolutionary differences that led to Togrudans having 3 Leku, while Twi'leks only have 2.
That's a good one.
I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
They're so similar, except for that. Stupid. All right, you ready?
Was that not it? We're good?
I guess you could cut it out and put it in. But no, I'll start over because I want to get the flow going.
Yeah, broadcast voice.
All right. Insert this.
In a world. All right.
Hello and welcome to the Force for Thought podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the evolutionary differences that led to Togrudans having 3 Leku and Twi'leks only having 2. I'm your host, Luke.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Max.
And today we will be discussing the newly announced Rey movie and the New Jedi Order.
On the Force for Thought podcast.
Dun, 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 music. I always forget the music.
I looked at Matt and Matt was like... in his head thinking like, I gotta edit this. Damn it.
Oh, I do apologize. Do you want to do it again, or can you?
No, keep it as is.
I think I'm gonna leave your first intro into.
So the Rey movie. It was announced a couple weeks ago at Star Wars Celebration.
Indeed.
It is going to be taking place 15 years after the Rise of Skywalker. Rey will be returning in some capacity. She's not necessarily the star, but we do know Daisy Ridley will be in it. And it takes place 15 years after the Rise of Skywalker. That's all we know, really. It was just announced.
Jedi Order.
Yeah. What do you guys think? Are we excited? Were we expecting this?
Definitely not expecting it. I'm excited that they're actually going to stick to their guns and bring it back. I think my biggest question, I know we have a lot to say, so I wanted to kind of I just want to say a little bit, and then we can kind of go around, because I want to get stuck on it too far, which I'm already doing. But my biggest question, I think, right, is Kathleen Kennedy said that she wants these movies to be an event, right? And so I don't think it's going to be the start of a new trilogy. I think that we're going to have these kind of one-offs. My biggest question is is it going to be a streaming movie only, or is it actually going to go into theaters with all 3 of these? But obviously we can focus on the Rey movie specifically. But I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that or anything.
I think
I
it'll
would
be in
shocked
theaters.
if it was not in theaters. Yeah.
But that's the thing. If in my mind, they're all coming out around the same time, but they're not. They just announced 3 of them. So
There's got to be at least a year difference between them all. I
Yeah.
would guess at least probably 2 years between them. But
I would hope so too.
I think the conversation between streaming and theatrical releases it's gonna be a very long conversation. I don't think it's gonna be settled for a very long time. But I feel like recently the conventional wisdom had been leaning towards streaming.
Yeah.
But I feel like very recently there have been enough successful blockbusters signaling a return to theaters that for something big like a Star Wars movie, I feel like they will be like, okay, we're going to do this as a theatrical release.
Return was huge at the box office too.
Yeah,
and that's a movie
it did
that
very
was
well at the
40
box
years old.
office,
I was going to say 30-something years old. It's only for the 40th anniversary. we talked about it. I saw it.
That's funny.
I think it's definitely going to be in theaters. The question I'm curious about is I've been wondering this for the last 5 years since the movies have been going to streaming so quickly, is does that affect the box office returns if the consumer knows that this Rey movie is going to be on Disney Plus in 4 weeks? Are they going to start at least delaying that and saying go watch this in theaters because it won't be on Disney Plus for 6 months? Because that's how it used to be with DVDs, and it would definitely motivate me a lot more to see things in theaters.
They announce it though, do they?
No, but it's known that it's going to be on Disney on streaming or whatever service that was made, that it's going to be there.
I feel like for
a
Star
month or 2
Wars,
at most.
I don't think it'll matter, right? If you're a Star Wars fan, you're going to go. Maybe the mass audiences will go, and I think that's going to be a big appeal too for. Hopefully, I think it's going to be a deterrent, right? It's Rey Skywalker now, but people,
Keep
I
that
think,
chuckle out of your tongue.
want to see. People are going to want to see, where that story ended up, but it's also a recognizable character. So I think people that aren't massive Star Wars fans are like, oh, I recognize her from the previous 3 movies, right? The past almost decade now of her being on those. I mentioned this to you guys, unless you guys have something else to say, I'm sure, obviously. But the biggest thing I want to get to
hold on, because I do have one more thing. Because I want to talk about what Kathleen Kennedy said about making Star Wars more of an event again, because I 100% agree. And I was kind of annoyed when she said that, because it's something that Matt and I talk about all the time when they release their TV shows on Disney Plus, that they just release them at like whatever
Middle of
midnight
the night.
Pacific.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I loved how during Game of Thrones when it was coming out, you knew it was going to be released at like whatever 7 or 8 o'clock at night, because we would get together with our friends, we would like sit down, we would wait for 7 o'clock to strike, and then we would start it right away. It was an event. You can have something feel like an event and stream it.
Yeah.
But you can't do it at you can't do it if you're just like releasing it at midnight, because I hate when I get these texts from Luke at like 10 in the morning, like, "Hey, did you watch the new episode of Mandalorian?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't watch it yet."
Yeah, we have to go to work.
Yeah.
And then also, I feel like watching it in the morning, I feel like it's such a great event to watch it at night.
Mm-hmm.
And then one thing on top of that is, I think the best event streaming they have done is the Stranger Things season 4 second release. Those last 2 episodes were great, because I think you can make an event of it, of a weekend, right? You release it on a long weekend, and you can watch all of it instantly, right? But Stranger Things specifically did an amazing job where they released the first 6 episodes, and then there was a month break. And then in that month, like, I almost wish I could go back there with that excitement and that anxiety.
Yeah.
And so I feel like you could almost,
I remember that hype.
right? And but on the contrast of that, I do love watching Star Wars on a weekly basis. But like you said, if you make it an event, if it's at 9 o'clock every night, that's perfect, right?
Yeah.
I know other people have like different schedules and whatnot, but like if you still adhere to that time slot, people will watch it the next day or after. It doesn't matter, right? But does it make that the event of a scheduled time would be great?
Yeah. There is a way to make something an event while keeping it streaming.
Yeah.
And it's not like a novel idea. Like Game of Thrones did this 5 years ago, and everyone was there for it. Everyone remembers it. And then Kathleen Kennedy just chose, or whomever at Lucasfilm just chose not to do that. And I'd love to know why, especially because she's saying that she wants to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I know. That's the thing. I feel like I always wonder. I'm always like a Kathleen Kennedy's like supporter in the fact that I feel like the beast is so big that it's not just one person to blame everything, right? Like, she's the head, sure, but there's so many channels, and she has a boss, right? And so there's like a million different levels of how things can go.
I wonder if it's like a technical issue, and they like the Disney servers wouldn't be able to handle that many concurrent viewers, because
that's definitely
I
a
mean, they
possibility.
probably have tons.
It's Disney, though. They have to figure it out. If HBO can do it, Disney can do it.
I know, but I mean, I guess I'm being a little bit too.
But that said, I
sympathetic.
think that was an issue with Game of Thrones at the end, wasn't it?
Yeah, the last couple seasons, and
Yeah.
Stranger Things on Netflix. So
So there you go.
And Netflix is established too. I mean, Disney Plus is relatively new to the game. They've only been around like 3-4 years, so they should be figuring it out by now. But I get why they weren't doing it with like the Mandalorian premiere, but I think they should have at least with season 3.
same. Going to the biggest thing that I texted you, Luke, to give context. You texted us about doing an episode about the Rey movie. Max and I weren't very interested at first to do one about the Rey movie for a couple of weeks, and then I don't know if you rewatched them, but I rewatched the sequel trilogy, and I texted you guys something that I thought was like, that kind of blew my mind, and it could be a stupid thought, but that's what got me on board with doing the episode, and that is a simple fact that if we fast forward X amount of years, I still am not. There's a blurry line if that pregnant Rey concept art is real or not. I can't tell.
The what?
The pregnant Rey concept art.
I am not familiar.
From Celebration?
I'm confident it's fake.
Okay.
But I'm not confident that it won't happen.
Yes. So what I texted you, because the photo looks so bad, but I don't think they would release. I think we would hear more about it and whatever. So I guess I'm just like, as I'm saying this out loud, I'm realizing it's
Because it
definitely
wasn't really concept art. It was
I've
like
never
it was
even
like a
heard of
live
this.
still. Because when people were debunking it, what they
Yeah.
were saying was, this isn't concept art. This is a live still, and they are
interesting.
years away from production on this. They're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
They're like, this is.
So
not
it's literally
real.
AI stuff, blah blah. I'm
Yeah.
tired of talking about AI. But my whole thought, even without not part of it, right? The biggest thing I was thinking is we're gonna have to fast forward some time, right?
15 years. That's
So
confirmed.
15 confirmed years. So then, when Kylo Ren, when Ben Solo passes away, he touches Rey and he gives her life back, right?
Mhm.
Is there a chance that he also impregnated her as well?
Yes.
And then 15 years later, now she has a child, and then also the Skywalker name lives on, not just with her, but with her child as well. And that was my biggest thing. I was like, that concept art, right, or the fake AI art, or whatever, that aside, it's like, he literally touches her stomach, right? And we also know that, like, Anakin doesn't have a father either.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it's
Conceived of the Force.
literally, like, I mean, and I feel like if they're the two strongest Jedi, Sith Jedi, right before he died, in the world, right, in the universe, in the galaxy, that's not out of the realm, right? that something like that happened.
I think it's definitely possible, and I think it is a really fun theory. You texted something about that, and that's when I said, all right, hold on, we can't talk about this anymore because now I do have a lot of thoughts and ideas and we need to talk about it on the podcast. Yes, I think that is definitely possible, and it does work on so many levels. I have some issues with it, and I'll get into that, but let me talk about what I do like about it. First off, you would kind of be bringing full circle, right? Because Rey's child would be born of the Force, kind of like Anakin was, and Anakin would
The
be
Skywalker
this child's
saga.
exactly. Anakin would be this child's great grandfather, right?
Yeah.
Which would also, you would feel like, okay, so this child should be a Skywalker. And at the end of Rise of Skywalker, Rey adopted the name, so it's like it makes it feel better, because a lot of people like they're always like, oh, Rey Skywalker, that's so stupid. But if she does have a kid and the kid's dad is conceived of the Force, but implanted by Ben or whatever, then it's like you want that kid to be a Skywalker.
Yeah.
And by her taking that name, that kid is rightfully a Skywalker, which just feels right. Like that kid being a Skywalker feels right. His great grandfather was Anakin. He was also conceived in the Force. Things are coming full circle. Like all that works for me. The problem that I have with that is it does continue the Skywalker saga.
Yeah.
And I don't think this should be a continuation of the Skywalker saga. I think this should kind of be its own thing.
Sure. I think that's the two things. One is a joke, and I wonder, going back to this Rogue One, hopefully I'll do in a couple weeks, I wonder if she just took the name Skywalker because that is like the name on like the land of like the lease or the plot that is in Tatooine. It's like, it's Skywalker.
It's on the
Check
D-Jab,
the
Rey
docs.
Skywalker.
Exactly. Oh, man.
That's hilarious.
We got to get into it.
I think
Go to the county auditor's office. Like, I would like the deed to this plot, please.
And I think the second thing is, I think that's something that Star Wars can consistently do is backtrack, right? I mean, like, have done a bunch. That's what we talk about, filling in the gaps. So I feel like, maybe that wasn't the end of the Skywalker saga fully. It's going to continue a little bit.
I am very glad that you've had this idea, that it brought you to doing this episode, because I
Yes.
really wanted to talk about the Rey movie.
You have the most to say.
I think that is dumb. I would be shocked if Rey has a child in this movie that was immaculately conceived like Anakin.
Yeah.
Especially if by Ben Solo. That would totally recontextualize that scene, I think, for the worse, instead of just...
Really? This surprises me so much about you. I would have thought you would have been on board for this theory.
The only reason I am on board is because I've heard that Rey is not necessarily the main character of this series, and so
it could be the
it would
child.
make sense a lot more if she had like a 15-year-old child.
I
and
would
then
like her
that
to
would
be the
cool.
main character, though, as well.
If she's the main character,
Yeah.
then no chance she has a baby, because she'd
Yeah.
be the main character, and
Yeah.
there's no way to tell a story without making the baby, the 15-year-old at this point, the main character. But I think there's just no chance of this. I would be very, very surprised.
So what do you think the movie... Because obviously it's going to be rebuilding the Jedi and the Jedi Order, right? So my thought was like, I presume that Rey would be like, okay, I'm the last Jedi. I'm going to continue this, teach my child like the ways of the Force if they're Force sensitive, and then slowly build the new Jedi Order. But so do you think that she's going to be off on like a solo mission trying to build it up, or where do you think it's going to go in general?
I think there's going to be a small Jedi Council with some other... I don't know if they will consider themselves masters, if they've been only training for like 15, maybe 10, even 10 years. I do think John Boyega will be in it. I think Finn will be a Jedi, and he'll be right there with her.
So you do think that, going back to what we were just talking about in your Rogue One?
Yes. I think there's no reason not to include Finn. Like, they hinted at him being a Jedi multiple times. I don't see why John Boyega would turn it down. I don't see why the narrative wouldn't lead them there naturally.
Yeah.
I think that Finn will definitely be a major part of this movie.
John Boyega's been obviously very vocal that his Star Wars days are over, especially recently. And I feel like...
Especially not recently. Recently, he's been suspiciously quiet. Right around the Rise of Skywalker, he was talking about how he's done with it.
No, and like he just had a press event for his new movie, which I'm blanking on, when they were talking about it.
The Woman King?
No. It was something. It's coming out. It's not out yet. He looks really cool in it. But there was something about he was saying his Star Wars days are over, which we've in the past. Liam Neeson said the same thing, and he's only in it for 2 seconds in Kenobi. But there is like this. I mean, also, have you seen the Freddie Prinze Jr. stuff that broke today? That
Today?
he was like, that today he was. What's today? May 18th. To date it, but Freddie Prinze Jr. said that he's not going to show up in Ahsoka because basically he did the voice of Kanan as a favor, and the favors have ran out now because he thinks it's doing a disservice to consistently show Kanan in new things.
I did hear about that. I don't think that was today.
Was it not?
I heard about that a little while
No, it was
ago.
a little while ago. I
Oh
saw
my
that a couple of days
I
ago.
want to cut that then. Hey, a couple days ago, did you see Freddie Prinze Jr.'s? But I think there's that thing though where you never can tell if it's going to throw somebody off the scent, or because it would make a lot of sense if Finn was in it. I mean, I guess when you think of Star Wars, right, in it overall, I'm trying not to say general. Listening to these back, I say general and interesting a lot, and it's bugging me so much. But I think it's not interesting, but in general, I feel like once these stories end, these big trilogies end, these characters then naturally go off by themselves, right? Like at the end of Return of the Jedi, they separate a little bit, right? Luke goes off and does his own thing and starts the temple, and then you have Han and Leia continue the rebellion, but then eventually Han leaves. And so I feel like after Rise of Skywalker, obviously Rey goes back, right? And so like to Tatooine, and so we're like, I don't know where her story is going, right? There's a high possibility because it's not even like Finn or like Rey and Poe were like great friends. Even so, it's like they have no real reason to stick together. I don't think Oscar Isaacs would be in this movie. I don't think Poe will be in the movie either.
I don't think so.
But like, I'm trying to think of like where these characters would naturally go. Right?
I
like,
think Finn and Rey would naturally go together. They were.
Yeah.
I mean, their friendship wasn't perfectly portrayed, but like Finn could sense through the Force when Rey died. Like they're linked. They're very close with each other, and you know they had that whole moment in the Rise of Skywalker where Rey wanted to go alone and Finn said like absolutely not, we go together.
Yeah.
And I think that sentiment carries through the end of the movie and beyond.
I feel like I always feel like I was gonna say in general, but I feel like throughout those three movies though that like Finn is a lot more friends with Rey than Rey is with Finn. You know what I mean? Because he's consistently. I mean, obviously it's like a writing thing, but he's consistently like, I gotta help. I gotta go find Rey. I gotta help Rey. I gotta do my part for the greater good for Rey.
Rose pops her head up and she's like, "I'm interested in you," and he's like, "I gotta go get Rey."
Yeah, yeah, literally. And then I feel like, then Rey goes to the fallen Death Star by herself, and like she's consistently like, why is this guy always around? Like
that is interesting, and like from a writing perspective, like the one time Rey does talk about Finn, Chewbacca says it for her, and she's like, yeah, say that. Like
yes,
they literally actively avoid having her say anything about Finn.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, not actually like a problem, but yeah.
No, yeah, I don't mind it, but
I think it makes sense. I think they very strongly hinted, more than hint at Finn's Force abilities, so I don't see. I would be shocked if they do this movie and they don't at bare minimum address him or something like that. I think he's going to be in it. I think John Boyega they could get to do it. I don't think we're going to see Poe. I don't think there's a reason to show Poe, like you said. Like I don't think or.
Maz Kanata though I feel like she's so underused in the past too that I could legitimately see her.
Yeah, I could see her being in
right.
it.
Yeah, I didn't think about her
Maz
even.
Kanata
actually,
is interesting because every single time anything in Star Wars comes out, I'm like, Maz Kanata could be in this. Like, she's 1,000 years old. She's in the High Republic. She could be in any book, any comic. She could have been in Jedi Survivor. Like,
she's really cool too.
At any point, she could pop up. You'd be like, yeah, I guess that makes sense.
I also hate talking about like, oh, well, celebrity said this because it's like it's all whatever. But I feel like obviously, but John Boyega was expressing disinterest, right? Or just being displeased about how Finn was supposed to do this and that. So it's the perfect redemption to come back as
even
well.
if he is displeased with it, like then come back and do it better. Like you wanted to be a Jedi, you definitely will be this time. It's a win for everyone.
Like, I think there's a couple people who want to be done with Star Wars that did end on a good note. Like I feel like a lot of people really liked Poe, and I don't think Oscar Isaac really has much interest in it. Although I feel like if they really wanted to, they could get him back because he's doing other superhero stuff. So it's not like he's above it, you know. Yeah. I feel like Adam Driver, he likes the weird artsy stuff. I feel like he would not want to.
He's supposedly Reed Richards for Fantastic Four. So
what? I didn't hear
There's
that.
a lot of rumors about that. Yeah.
Signing on to that.
Okay, well then I take back exactly what I said because then he'd be doing superhero stuff too.
I wish he was doing more.
I don't think there's any scenario where an actor is like, no, I don't want to be in Star Wars, and that's that. Like, there's always that door open. Like in 2015, Harrison Ford hadn't wanted to be in Star Wars since 1980. And they brought him back for The Force Awakens and then killed him. Finally, it's what he always wanted. If you had told anyone after The Force Awakens that Harrison Ford would be back in in Episode 9 4 years later, like I know there were extenuating circumstances with Carrie Fisher passing.
It only took a death to get him back.
the door is never closed, and
Yeah.
if it ever was for anyone, it was Harrison Ford. There's no one in Star Wars that hates Star Wars more than him, and if you can get him back, you can get anyone.
I agree, but I think that's why we're gonna see Finn again. And I think it makes sense. Story. I think the recurring characters is we're gonna see Rey. We know that. I think we'll see Finn. Maz Kanata would be fun. Didn't think about that until the last 10 minutes or so, and then I think we will see Luke Skywalker again.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I think,
Do you think we're going to see Kylo or Ben Solo as a?
I don't.
No.
I think we will.
I
Yeah.
would love to, but I don't think we will.
I think we will if we see. That'd be actually really annoying if Rey's just like doing dishes, walking around the house, cleaning on just like a random like Sunday afternoon, and then like there's this like Force Ghost, Ben Solo.
I just
like,
want to check
just
up
let me
on him.
alone. Yeah, exactly. But I think it would make sense that if they did have like a child somehow for him to communicate or
It would
whatever.
make more sense then.
But
I think
without
I know I
that,
just said
I'm
I
on
do think
no.
we'll see Ben Solo. I'm thinking more no now because the character of Kylo Ren is so different than the character of Ben Solo.
Yeah,
and
it's
it would
hard.
be like jarring to
Yeah.
see more Ben Solo content without like
Yeah.
tying that to
Yeah.
Kylo Ren.
You're right.
I mean, we don't even know how he talks. Ben Solo's one and only line was "ow."
Yeah.
Right,
I am the
exactly.
shrug.
The shrug. Oh, that was such a good shrug.
It was a
though.
great
such
shrug.
a great callback to Han Solo.
I wanted
and
to be
Endor.
like when he did
I
it.
could- yeah, it was great. And that moment too, where they tossed the lightsaber like a baton.
Yes.
It was so good. But I think. So I was thinking about my ideas for the movie and where I think it should go and the kind of themes that it needs to touch on and everything. And one thing that I was thinking was for the antagonist, because who are you going to get to be the bad guy? Because you don't want to reintroduce like
Yes.
a third empire at this point or
No.
anything. It needs to be a bad
That
guy.
would be
Do they bring
hysterical.
back do they bring back another Sith Lord? Is it like a one-off Sith, kind of like Maul was in Phantom Menace or something like that? And I thought one thing that would be really cool would be to bring a bad guy, kind of like a Sith hunter, someone who is not Force sensitive but has always been deeply jealous of the Force, and somebody who will do anything to become Force sensitive, but that's not something that you can become. It's something that you're born with, and it drives him mad to a dark side, even though he's not a Force sensitive user, who relies on technology to mimic Force abilities, because it's something that
Like
has
Haja.
been. Yeah, like what?
Like Haja, the character from Kenobi that pretended to be a Jedi, but he was really bad at it. Kumail
Yes.
Nanjiani.
Yes, but better. Because yeah, they hint at abilities or technology that can do that in the comics. In the Dr. Aphra comics, there's the Spark Eternal, which was an ancient cult called the Ascendancy, which basically recreated Force abilities using technology. There was in the High Republic, I think they kind of even do some stuff like that too, don't they? The Nile.
The Nile have creatures that are able to basically turn Force sensitive people to dust. Hasn't really been
Interesting.
explored that explicitly, but
Interesting.
it's a Force weapon.
But I think that would be a good idea for a villain for a single movie, and because it would be able to tie into a theme, which I really want them to touch on, which is what Rey's going to be struggling with. What does it mean to be a Jedi? What does it mean to have the Force and to use this ability? And where does the Jedi Order go from here? Because she needs to rebuild the Jedi Order, but she also needs to fundamentally change the Jedi Order, because she knows that at the height of their powers, the Jedi were flawed. They had beliefs that were a little too strict and didn't really make sense. I just recently rewatched the prequel trilogy, and it is insane. A scene in Revenge of the Sith where Anakin's talking to Yoda, and Anakin's saying like, "Oh, I've had visions of death," and Yoda's like, "Oh, is this of a close loved one?" And he's like, "Yeah." And Yoda's response is, "Yeah, you need to not feel sad about death. You need to basically get over it. Death is a natural part of life, and you shouldn't feel close to other people." And it's like when you like put it in that light, like it makes so much sense why somebody would turn to the dark side when the quote unquote good guys are saying, yeah, we're selfless, we only care about others, but we don't actually have any sort of attachments to anyone other than ourselves. Whereas the Sith, who are the quote unquote bad guys, are saying, listen, we're giving you the solution. It's okay to love. Passion is where we draw our strength.
Yeah.
Like, you can come to us, you can love, you can be passionate. That's great. And so I think this is something that Rey needs to finally kind of struggle with and cope with. Like, what does it mean to be a Jedi? Why did the Jedi fail? And how do they go from here? How can she rebuild it in a way that makes sure that they don't commit the same mistakes that they made in the past?
I went 1,000% agree, which is why I feel like the conflict will come in within rebuilding it, right? I mean, if you're rebuilding from scratch, like the three of us will have three different opinions on something. Without, I guess, besides this podcast, this came together really easily. But besides that, like if you're gonna get a group together and really build something, yes, Rey can be the leader, right? I mean, Luke Skywalker trained her, kind of, but like she has that training. She right, the Last Jedi then passed on the Last Jedi, right? And so I feel like there's going to be conflict. So she's going to be the head of this new Jedi Order, but whoever's falling in line, there's going to be differing opinions as well, right? And so like hopefully like Finn will be like her right-hand man, but it's like somebody within that organization presumably is going to be frayed, right? And maybe that's not the main villain, but that's got to be something that's happening too. But I feel like it would be interesting. See, there it is again, interesting. It would be cool to see kind of almost like a mole spy type story as well, with somebody's infiltrating, whether it is maybe working with somebody, I don't know, outside of that new Jedi Order.
I agree. I think in terms of introducing a villain, like I have heard a lot of people talk about, like, oh, you can't bring back the Sith, you can't bring back the Empire. Why
can't you bring back a Sith?
Because Palpatine was like all the Sith, and I think that was a very conclusive end to the Sith dynasty. But
it is tough to bring back.
This may be a matter of semantics, though, because Rey is going to be rebuilding the Jedi Order, and the dark side is always going to be there. Yeah. Like, just because there's a fallen Jedi or a dark side user, they're not necessarily a Sith, but I think that could easily be the villain, no matter what. And as far as what you were saying about Rey's purpose and, redefining what the Jedi Order is in terms of passion and love, I've said it probably 1 million times, but I'm going to keep shouting it from the mountaintops. Read The High Republic. All of these themes are explored, and it's amazing, and I know 1,000 times more people... Cut that. I know 10 times more people are going to watch this movie than read The High Republic, but I'm not really clamoring for that kind of story because I've already seen it. And if you are, which I know you are, read The High Republic. It's really, really good.
But just because they're doing it in the High Republic, though, doesn't mean that they're not going to do it in the Rey movie too.
No,
we've seen Star Wars double up on a lot of stuff.
And you can't. I don't see how they go forward with a new Jedi Order without touching upon these themes or the prophecy of the Chosen One. That's another thing that I've been saying for a long time that I really want to see them explore. What did that mean? Because even Yoda at one point says, "Oh, a prophecy misread that may have been." Like, okay, what is the prophecy though?
I honestly,
what
I think
does
we got to
balance mean?
The balance is interesting, right? I mean, the balance is in between, right? You can't, which is like, I guess the opposite of what the Jedi are, though. They're so one way, and then the Sith are so the other. But I feel like almost getting away from the prophecy, the Chosen One, because in that, it just muddles, especially when you're dealing with an IP this big. Everyone's like, oh, Luke is the Chosen One. It's like, oh, well, no, Anakin was. And then you're like, oh, wait, now it's going to be somebody else. And I feel like that's what they did with the Matrix, and it gets really muddy if there's one person.
Well, I don't think it should be anyone. I want them to address the prophecy of the Chosen One, but I don't want there to be a Chosen One. I want them to basically come to some sort of conclusion that there is no prophecy of the Chosen One.
I agree. I was very played out with the prophecy. I read Master and Apprentice, the book about Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, which is great, and it explores a lot about the prophecies, because Qui-Gon is really into prophecies, and so is Dooku, who's also in the book. And at one point, they have like the prophecy, she who is born from darkness will give birth to darkness, alluding to Leia. And it's like, oh, hey, that's a cool prophecy because it happens. But then like all the other prophecies are just like, what's the point of this story element? Like, I don't get where they're going. I don't get why we're going here.
That seems like such a thing that generation would be into. Dooku, and a lot of prophecy talking about Dooku, Qui-Gon Jinn.
Yeah, they need some war to get them busy.
Oh man, I feel like that's the biggest thing that I feel like people are not conflicted, but I feel like people are surprised by the right movie. We'll see what the I guess the turnout is. I'm really excited for it. We all are, but I think that's the biggest thing they have going against them is the villain, and it's because Star Wars is built on great villains, right? I mean, even Krennic in Rogue One is so good. It's like we've kind of seen him a little bit, but yet he's very different than like Tarkin, and Tarkin's a great villain too, and he's only in A New Hope, and then
Dryden Voss is a great villain.
There's so many. So how are you gonna? I don't want to say top it, but like in this new era, we don't know what to expect, and so that's why like the Sith are always there's always going to be darkness with the light, right? And so it's like that is a thing that we can explore, but we've kind of been there. Yours is interesting, right? Where you're talking about someone using technology that is someone very jealous of the Force, but that's something that I think whoever is the villain in this, whether it's one person or multiple people, right? Because like that's something that's been very popular, I feel like, in culture lately. I'm going to go back to the Batman games in Gotham Knights, not Batman Knight. It's the Court of Owls, right? It's a full organization of people that are jealous, and they want to take it down. And so, like, are we going to deal with more of an organization, not necessarily the Sith? Are we going to deal with more politics of what is the new Jedi Order within this government system?
I don't want to sound like a broken record, just talking about
High
the High Republic all day,
yeah.
but in Phase 2 of the High Republic, they introduced a new order called the Path of the Open Hand, and their whole shtick is that they believe that the Force is a cosmic entity that is to be free. They want the Force to be free, and they see whenever the Jedi manipulate the Force that it's damaging the Force and that it's an assault on nature, basically. And so they they are,
Yeah.
and they oppose the Jedi very ideologically. And it's a really unique take on the Force, and furthermore, in the Battle of Jeddah and all of basically the history of Jeddah, it's like a meeting place for different Force religions, and they all have different views and beliefs on what the Force is. So there are a lot of places it could go, whether they want to create something new or pull from these stories.
Yeah.
They have opportunities, and I don't think it just has to be. I would be really disappointed if it was Sith again. Even if it was just a dark side order, they could just rename it, and I would be happy.
Well, something that I was going to build up to as well was, I think whoever is the villain, I think can expand beyond this specific movie. Because one of my least favorite trends, right, is just like in the MCU, Michael B. Jordan's character in Black Panther, for example, is a great villain. Just in my mind, save them, right? You never know what's going to happen, right? He could have been a great main character in Black Panther 2, right? We didn't know the future of, like, literally, I guess, actual life with Chadwick Boseman. But, like, if you would have saved him, he could have had a redemption arc and become Black Panther, right? I mean, I don't know. That's probably too in the weeds, and I know there's a lot of conflicting things within that story. I'm not really a big MCU fan, but I think there's the opportunity to go beyond a single movie as a villain, right? For me, maybe it's because in most IP, prefer the villain, like mainly just in Batman. It's like the villains are the best part of Batman. Batman's great, but the villains are cooler. And so it's one of those things where it can go beyond it. Like, I'm not saying like if Darth Vader went beyond the original trilogy and became a villain in like a new trilogy, but like I feel like a villain definitely has that gusto and that pull. Like they definitely can if they make a cool enough character, specifically in a Star Wars universe. We all freak out when we saw Vader and Kenobi as much as we saw Kenobi in Kenobi. Yeah. And so I think they can create a villain and somebody that's worthy adversary, not only for this story, but for Star Wars going into the new Jedi Order era.
I agree. There's kind of a vacancy in Star Wars for how many great villains there are relative to how many interesting villains there are. Like, a lot of them, like Krennic, Tarkin, Palpatine, they're just bad because bad, and they're really, really cool, and they're captivating to watch, but there's not really much nuance to them.
There's not the Mauls.
Right.
Yeah.
See,
more
but
Mauls and Vaders.
one thing that I always talk
Kylo
about,
Ren.
though, is how I don't want to see another redemption story. And I feel like what you're almost hinting at, and I don't think you're doing it purposefully, though, is you're listing all the people that are bad that don't have redemption stories. Because I feel like...
Sorry, go on. I thought you were done with your thought.
No, that's it. I just want to see, in the Rey movie, I want to see a bad guy who is bad.
Yes, I agree. But what if we saw that start in the Rey movie? Somebody that's on that Jedi Council that you were just saying, Luke, that potentially could be there. That person turns bad. They see the dark side. They're going to be like a mole within this new Jedi Order. They're a villain with a blue lightsaber or whatever color they have.
You want to see that too.
I do want to see, exactly. And then they go beyond the Rey movie, right? Maybe they don't stop him. They don't know he's bad. He's
they
going
get
off
away or something.
Exactly. He's going off his own mission, and we just get just say Rey shows up in like another spin-off show, or she's in a minor character in the next movie. And we actually follow a villain for the first time in a Star Wars movie.
I think the way they talked about this as Celebration too is they wanted this to be like the start of a new era in the Star Wars timeline too. So that would be a good way to kick it off, right? Because you can like kind of set up like all these different threads and then start pulling on them in other TV shows, books, comics, movies, whatever you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a good idea. Like to have the main villain kind of start an overarching story moving forward, and then in the future do some sort of team up like you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to talk too much about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it is something that I talk about within the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Kang the Conqueror. I don't want to see just another Thanos who's just bigger and badder.
No.
I think what they should have done was for this next phase was start doing these huge supervillain team ups.
Yeah.
But to your point, you need to start leaving some supervillains on the table in order to do that.
Exactly, and that's the thing. I feel like everyone's like, okay, how can we make this movie really cool, right? And you have a one-off villain, and in that way you can get the biggest celebrity possible
Right.
that has a one-movie contract, right? And that's like with the MCU, they should have deconstructed what they did, do more single movies, and then reconstruct it. You're right, make it worth it. And I think that's something that people had to think with. The problem with this sequel trilogy is that, like, if Palpatine was semi-hinted at or introduced in Force Awakens, and then, is there in Last Jedi and becomes the villain in Rise of Skywalker, payoff, right? Like, that makes sense. But I think that's the thing, is just, like, shoehorning something in. And I think they have the opportunity to start something for the new era, not even just this specific movie. Even though I am really excited for this movie, because I'm like, in my mind, it's just going to pick up back on Tatooine, but 15 years have passed, so clearly...
I hope we don't see Tatooine.
I would be surprised if we see Tatooine.
I know.
I imagine she was there for like a half an hour. She just went to go bury the lightsabers and then peaced out.
We got to see a flashback of her unbury those lightsabers.
No, those lightsabers will not appear in the Rey movie.
Oh, yes, they will, because if she has a kid, they're gonna use them, right?
No, make your own lightsaber. Those lightsabers are staying buried for a long time. I am confident with that.
Oh,
I feel very strongly differently.
I agree.
Really?
Yes,
I think they're coming out.
They're coming out instantly, Luke.
Oh my gosh!
I agree
that
with
would
you.
undo the entire Skywalker saga. They finally closed the door on it.
No, that's what they're opening it back up though with this movie.
If she has a kid, like you said,
yes,
it all hinges on that. If she has a kid and that kid is raised to become a Jedi, then yes, it is going to be a very literal passing of the baton. She's going to dig up the lightsabers and it's going to keep on going. But that kind of brings us into this next big point that we want to talk about, which is this just going to be Star Wars Episode 10? Because I don't think it is. But I feel like with everything we're talking about, if she has a kid, if she raises her kid to be a Jedi, it's another line of Skywalkers. They're going to take the lightsabers back. You're making episode 10.
That is episode 10. And because it's not that, because it's not episode 10, they would have already told us that instead of saying it's a Rey Jedi Order movie, they would have said it's Star Wars episode 10. And because they haven't, I think it's definitely not going to take those. The sand accepted those lightsabers. The Force pulled back those lightsabers and like it's not like Rey took out a shovel and dug it down 6 feet. Like the sand accepted the lightsabers as the end to that story. There's no way they're giving them back.
You're hinged on sand.
I think if this movie is not Star Wars Episode 10, which I don't think it will be, it's not. We know it's not. I could say that. I feel like, but
we know it's not. But like,
I feel like there will be a Star Wars Episode 10 someday.
I agree. I think when it's going to be a 10, it's going to be another trilogy. I think that's what constitutes, right? So it's like we know this is a one-off,
absolutely,
right? Like so it's.
But when that happens, it's going to somehow be a continuation of the Skywalker saga. And I'm sorry to say, Luke, those lightsabers are coming back out.
No chance. Although I did have the thought while you guys were talking, Bad Batch is ending with season 3, so we're due for another animated series. Do you think that could take place during this new era that's being established with the Rey movie?
Yeah, I feel like it would.
I would like that. I think it's ripe to be explored so long as they do it kind of like Matt says, like do it like as a setup. Like don't do this as like a one-off film. Do it as like this is a launching point of a new era.
Yeah.
Introduce a bad guy who can be like an overarching bad guy throughout, and then we can explore it in all sorts of different media, including an animation show. I would like that.
Do you have any thoughts on that? I wanted to talk about Arrows in general, but do you have any thoughts about the animation stuff?
I think the next animated series will be either this era with Rey 15 years after the Rise of Skywalker, or with the other film that was announced that's taking place with the Prime Jedi. I think that makes a little bit less sense because it's going to be like one Jedi and there's less characters.
Yeah.
And so I do think that there will be a animated series in this era. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually surprised they haven't been doing more animated shows. I guess no, that's so false. Sorry, I meant the ones that I'm interested in. I guess
I was just about to agree with you. They haven't done many animated shows.
Well, they have Tales of the Jedi, right? They have Visions.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't counting Tales of the Jedi. Well, that's more of a kids show. I know that there's a stigma that all the animated series are kids shows, but Tales of the Jedi is
that's
like
what I mean. I need
a very young aged demographic.
Luke distinguishing the difference of kids shows for what are all animated shows. People at home right now are like, I think this guy looks exactly how I think he looks. Luke's like, no, that one's not an animated kids show.
Tales of the Jedi is for ages 2 to 6. Star Wars Resistance is for ages 7 to 10. Star Wars Rebels is for ages 11 to 13. And Clone Wars is ages 14 and up.
There you go.
There it is. But I feel like I want it just makes more sense that they would be not. I don't know, especially right now. I don't know. Did you see the article I sent you? Apparently, Star Wars Rebels was not a union, a WGA writers' room. And so people were angry. We can cut this part if we wanted to, for real, though.
No, this is topical. The Writers Guild is on strike right now.
The
so
WGA is on
it's
strike.
affecting everything, including Star Wars.
Yeah,
and Andor's temporarily paused.
It is.
Everything
Which
with Tony
I thought
Gilroy
they finished
going
writing
on.
Andor.
They did, but, my friend, that's what they said. Sorry, I don't know why I said it like that. Like I was a villain.
You're gonna drop a knowledge bomb on me.
I know. I was like, yes, an opportunity to
Fell
talk
into my
about
trap.
something I love. Stranger Things did the same thing, though, is that basically they say, they both, Tony Gilroy from Andor and then the Duffer Brothers from Stranger Things, kind of said something similar where, yes, the writing is done, but the writing doesn't stop once filming starts because they're doing so many rewrites. And on Seinfeld, I was just listening to a podcast on Arrested Development, and they were talking about how they had the pages rewrote at 5 a.m. For a scene that was shooting at 8. And so there's just consistently, especially I think when you're like, is this the best it could be? How much do we punch it up? So I give them a lot of credit for pausing Andor. I don't think anybody in the cast is probably happy. I don't know if you heard about like what's his name? Oh my God, Cassian Andor himself.
Diego Luna.
Yes, thank you. He was talking about how like he's excited to like go back on theater because of how grueling the filming has been. I think he's just kind of right. I mean, it has to be a lot because we're filming so much all the time and 12 episodes, hour long.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically filming 3 entire films at once.
Exactly. So it's got to be, and it's like for a huge period of time. And so I think, but going back to the original point, I guess, was apparently Star Wars Rebels specifically. I assume the other ones aren't. I assume Bad Batch isn't. Also,
why are you talking about Star Wars Rebels? That show ended in 2018. What's the relevance?
The writer's strike. And so basically, when a couple of the writers tweeted about it, and they were like, "Hey, for example, basically this show was non-union in the fact that basically they had to, since there's so many episodes in a season, they had to beat board basically 2 episodes in a single day, and then go home and then write the episode. But you're paid for when you're in office doing that stuff, right? But when you're sent home to actually write the thing, there's so many problems that come up, right? So you can write and get paid for that. But once you were like, oh, wait, there's so many things that I need to figure out that don't make any sense. I need to like mentally figure this out, call people, right? Write it out, spend 4 more hours figuring it out. All that stuff is basically just like null and void for pay. And so I'm just surprised that hasn't gotten more traction, specifically that it's like owned by Disney and specifically was produced under the Disney era, right?
Right.
So that was surprising as well. But I'm surprised that hasn't got any more kind of flack in general. But I think also Tony Gilroy saving the day with Andor. So that was a little too inside baseball, like too in the business
No, that was interesting.
of things.
I don't know anything about that stuff.
All right, yeah.
So
how do we recover? Oh, sorry, are we ending? Did I kill it? Did I literally take it out
Do
and
you guys
shoot
have anything else to say?
the episode?
No, I don't have. I think I covered all my ideas.
So that's what we think about the Rey movie. What do you guys think? Is it gonna be great? Is it gonna talk about Finn and Luke Skywalker? Is it gonna have Rey's illegitimate child? Let us know.
Whoa! You don't have to.
Illegitimate.
What the heck was that? Throwing shade in there.
I don't think that story element has any
of the
traction.
Force.
Let us know on social media. You can find me on Twitter at KitFistoBlog. Matt, where can we find you?
You can find me at Filmowski.
You can find me at Maxter Jedi.
And most importantly, you can find us at Force for Thought on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and most importantly, Spotify.
Thanks for listening.
Do we have any Force for Thought for anybody?
Oh,
that segment that we decided to do like 8 episodes in.
So, Matt, before we leave, do you have any Force for Thought to leave us with?
I just asked you. I don't have any.
I thought you did. I thought you
No,
were
I'm
talking
so
about
sorry.
realty. I'm sorry.
Oh, wait, realty. Wait, is that the Force for Thought?
I thought that's what we were doing.
Oh, is it? Wait, what was
Did you want to do a Rogue One on Space Realty?
Oh, I want to do a Rogue One
We
about
can talk about it for a long time.
Not
This
only
has
that-
come up a lot.
Yeah. Think about the logistics. If you're selling to a Gungan, what does that look like versus selling to somebody that is just like a human or a droid or something, right? There's just like a million options.
Why?
Okay, so like,
Because how high do you build the ceilings? You know, like some.
what does an
creatures are 12
apartment
feet
building look
tall.
like? Yes. What if you're gonna go show somebody something? If normal for just say a human in Star Wars, there's a bathroom, right? A normal bathroom. Just say you're just selling a studio apartment. It's got a bathroom, a kitchen, a place to sleep / a living area, right? But it's like, what does that look like for like a bigger species? What does it look like for I don't know, what does it look like for like Yoda's species, right? It's like those ceilings are smaller. Babu Frick's species is great in Mandalorian, where they have a little place underneath it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
What is that real estate like?
I imagine the resale is very different in the galaxy far, far away than it is here. Like, you have to custom build basically every living space to whatever species you're building for.
See,
So there's just no code. It's just anarchy.
no, there's got to be a code. See, okay, hold on. Let's save it, because this is what's in my head all the time about
all right, we'll make a Rogue One about it.
All right, we'll make a Rogue One about it.
Take some force for thought. We'll talk about it in very, very descriptive detail in the future.
I guess another force for thought is, just think about those lightsabers coming back and that sand sucking them back up,
Yeah. Do you think
puking them back out.
Do you think that was just Rey force pushing them down, or do you think that was the force accepting them as the symbolic end to the Skywalker saga?
Let us know in the comments.
Sammy.